For more on this discussion, we are joined by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's Executive Director, Mr. Nishan Bolton, Wits University Centre for Diversity Studies Director, Professor Melissa Steyn, and June 16 Soweto Uprising leader and anti-apartheid veteran Seth Mazibuko also will join us in a moment. But we're taking your calls as well. 010-594-6010, and feel free to send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. I think, Mr. Mazibuko, I actually want to start with you because there's obviously the issue of we are, this year going to be a 31-year-old democracy, and for decades prior to that, there's been a sense that a fight towards a non-racial country really being the center of it. And I wonder what you reflect on as you listen to a lobby group like Afriforum saying that the Afrikaner nation is being left behind. This entire debacle, what do you make of it, Mr. Mazibuko? Let's start there.
Wish I could cry. My sister, and think of the days of my youth being imprisoned, being tortured by Afrikaners. Don't forget that. 16-year-old being taken into solitary confinement for 18 months, and being requested by the call of 1994 to become part of peace and reconciliation and the government of national unity of them. And today, the very people I've forgiven are the people I've forgiven who are saying, we're not going to listen to you. We're not going to use any of your structures post.
Mr. Mazibuko, your line is giving us some trouble. What we're going to do is try and drop you out and then bring you back in, just so hopefully we'll get a clearer line. These things do happen, technical gremlins. And I think that we have, although, heard just how emotive the point that you've made there is, Mr. Mazibuko, talking about as someone who was 16 years old and tortured in solitary confinement, having found forgiveness and now shocked that these are the conversations that we're having. Professor Steyn, let's bring you in here. You know, it's quite a time to be alive in the country. As you watch the utterances that we've heard from Kali Kriel just moments ago, what do you think this does for diversity, unity and diversity, and that discussion in South Africa?
Good evening. I just quickly need to correct you that I've retired as director of the Centre for Diversity Studies. So just to say that I'm not the director. Right. Well, I think it's quite clear that these utterances and these actions on the part of these interest groups are damaging the reconciliation process that we have been working on for so long in this country. It is understandable that for Black South Africans watching this and listening to this, it is a source of great outrage and pain that that Afrikaners, this particular subset of Afrikaners, are behaving in ways that we can only regard as seriously disloyal to the project of nation building, and are bringing in a foreign country to try and advance their interests within this country, and are actually throwing away the goodwill that has been developed over the last years. So I just think that, you know, the old scars are being scratched open, and it's just so disillusioning and heartbreaking that you still have a group of people who do not identify with the broader project of building South Africa as a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic country, but who rather still have an identification that tries to separate themselves from the rest of the country and to argue for some sort of special interests for themselves, as opposed to being just part of the nation.
You know, in a few moments, we're going to be speaking to Joost Strydom, who's with the Orania movement, and they too seeking U.S. support. And, you know, you make the point around a grouping that wants to separate itself from the country. Mr. Nishan Bolton, I'll bring you in here, speaking for the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Professor Steyn says an old wound has been scratched open. Is that what you hear?
Well, thank you very much. I think firstly, we must not accord Afriforum a status that is undue. They do not speak for all Afrikaners. There have been many Afrikaner organizations in agriculture and in business and in the faith community who have disassociated themselves from the viewpoints and the actions of Afriforum. So I think that that's the first thing we must take off the table. I think secondly, you know, there's a bigger picture. Afriforum and Trump have an ideological alignment. Trump, remember, has been supportive of the Ku Klux Klan, of the Proud Boys, has an agenda called Agenda 2025, which at the heart of it is about promoting and entrenching white supremacy, not only in the US, but across the world. And South Africa, for them, is a test case to in a sense, preserve white privilege, but to also send a message to Americans who might not approve of them, that their theory, the Great Replacement theory in the US, which the conservatives have championed, and essentially what they have said to Americans is that in a few years' time, white people will be the minority in the US, and look at what happens to minorities in countries like South Africa. And that's really what's at play here, is to use South Africa's progress to destabilize their progress in the actions that are being hinted at, to, in essence, bolster the notion of white supremacy as part of their overall agenda against progressive values, not only in the US, but across the world. And that's really what's at play here. You know, if you look at Solidarity's statement, I mean, Afriforum's statement, they refer to themselves, interestingly, as Afrikaners are a Western community at the southern tip of Africa. So what do they mean by this Western community? They essentially mean that they would like to be seen as white, as Christian, and therefore deserving of the support of Trump. But at the heart of it, Afriforum cannot accept that this is a predominantly black country. It has a majority black government, it has a black president. They would rather go and beg a white president in the US to do their bidding. And I think we must condemn it.
Mr. Mazibuko, we've got you on the line now, and we got you cut off a little bit earlier on, but you'd make the point around just the emotions that this brings up, having been, you know, a teenager that was tortured by the apartheid government yourself. And now, 31 years into our democracy, this discussion, a lobby group speaking to the US about an Afrikaner community that is being excluded and asking for support. You can finish off that thought, Mr. Mazibuko.
You know, what makes me very emotional about this, it is that we come from a history as black people that was not kind to us as black people and children, where at some point we were forced to study in the language of Afriforum. Forced. And even when we said, no, we can't, because it is the language of the oppressor, we were taken to jail. Some of our leaders killed for having said we can't. We come to the post-1994. We still have, hold on, we are called as black people please listen to peace and reconciliation. The Desmond Tutus that Mandela speak of, the rainbow nation. We listen to our leaders who are black like us. We accept this. It would have been one of our maybe resolutions to say Afrikaners go away. We didn't. We didn't. We stayed with them. We created laws embedded in our constitution to protect even those that might want to do that. But Afriforum decides, no, we're not going to listen to you. We are going to go to America. I asked of Americans, why didn't Afriforum come during Obama? Why didn't Afriforum? Actually, there was at some point where there was what is called constructive engagement during our times when we're fighting Ronald Reagan being a leader. And I'm asking, what is this white friendship, this white relationship that Afriforum seeks to protect their own? Where do we go as South African blacks? I've got a daughter that will want to ask me, where were you? And then I tell my daughter that now at 16, I was in jail. Let Afriforum tell me who of their children have been at the year 16 arrested in the new democracy and put in jail for fighting, for speaking Afrikaans, or for taking land. Let them tell me. I'm not going to be academic about this issue. I'm just going to be basic. Let Afriforum tell me who of their children has been arrested at the age 16, put to Robben Island, put in solitary confinement under the Section 6 of the Terrorism Act of 1966.
Yeah. Mr. Mazibuko.
They seem to be saying, no, your kindness is not good enough. We are going to go to, who's this guy? Trump, and get Trump to help us deal with you. You are too kind to have been so sympathetic. Yeah. Not even sympathetic, but so reconciliatory.
Mr. Mazibuko, stay with us. We're going to keep this conversation going. And we're going to open up the lines as well. 010-594-6010 to give us a call. Anonymous is in Johannesburg. Anonymous, good evening.
Evening, my dear sister. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling. What are your thoughts?
My thought about the Afriforum, I think they're opening the wounds of the post-1994 about the apartheid, as you are one of the guests there. She stated very clearly that we've got people within the country who pretend to be in the rainbow nation. The reconciliation, which the problem with the Afriforum or the BOA is that they never apologize of what happened during the apartheid. And it's unfortunately that if those type of a people who doesn't want to build the country, South Africa is not a banana republic. It's a country governed by the Constitution. So we stand firm of what we believe on within our country. What your other guest is just saying now, Samazi, is clearly very taught that we must not sit and divest ourselves from what this Afriforum. Actually, I believe that when these four gentlemen, when they land in the country, or rather they seek the refugee there in U.S., otherwise, when they land in the country, they must be arrested for treason which they are trying to cause in our country. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you so much for calling, Anonymous. Of course, you know that the treason matter is one that the MK party is taking forward with the courts. But we're going to take more calls and we'll continue with the discussion as well. But as we take a short break, when we come back, we'll speak to the head of Orania. Do they support the steps taken now by Afriforum? Stay with us. Welcome back. Right, so the head of the small Afrikaner-only town, Orania, Joost Strydom, expressed appreciation to the US President Donald Trump over what he terms a recognition of the Afrikaners as a grouping. He was reacting to Trump's signing of the executive order that cut funding to South Africa and also offered Afrikaners refugee status in America. Strydom joins us now for more. Strydom, since that executive order was signed, a lot has taken place, and one of the latest, of course, being Afriforum. As we speak, they are in Washington, D.C. They've met once again with the Trump administration, and this time asking for more help for the Afrikaner community. But in fact, they're saying that they want to help to secure cultural space for Afrikaners, but in South Africa. So I don't know what you make of that. Is that to say that there's a loss of interest in the refugee status to live in the US? Do you support that? And do you support the steps that have been taken by Afriforum this time around?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I think from Orania's side, we won't stand in the way of any Afrikaner choosing to take up President Trump's offer of refugee status. With deteriorating economic and criminal and corruption and service delivery events in South Africa, I can understand that some Afrikaners would choose to seek refuge in the United States. However, that's not our point of view. As a community, we embrace the fact that we are a people upon ourselves, and from that you make the logical conclusion that we are formed here in Africa. We have no other home. We cannot go elsewhere and continue to exist as a people. We will become something else. As Afrikaners, we want to stay in Africa. We have a long-term plan of staying here and surviving here, and that entails that we must be recognized as a people, as an indigenous people to this continent as well. We truly have no other home. And Orania offers in all this only one thing, and that is a solution to a lot of the friction in South Africa, a solution to the many cultures of South Africa that feel unwelcome in some of the dispensational arrangements in South Africa, and rather saying, well, as culture, we embrace self-sufficiency, we embrace local government, not forced government from the top down, but rather the people themselves deciding how they want to order their lives and making decisions for themselves. The Orania model has been a solution for many other communities visiting us around the South African dispensation, and they look at us for solutions, and that is something that we can provide. So in the first place, yes, we are thankful that someone recognized us as a people, that President Trump specifically named us by our name as Afrikaners. Secondly, we are not planning to leave South Africa as refugees. We are indigenous to South Africa. And finally, the Orania model is and can be a solution for many of the peoples of South Africa and should be embraced as such.
Yeah.
Away with centralized government and towards cultural autonomy.
Okay, you talk about cultural autonomy and being grateful that Trump has recognized you for, I suppose, your cultural identity. And this is what Afriforum is asking for. Help to secure cultural space for Afrikaners. And you say, recognizing our identity. Has the Afrikaner identity in any way, shape or form in the past 31 years been not identified? So talk to me about how the Afrikaner cultural identity has been threatened in South Africa.
It's the Afrikaner cultural identity is surviving specifically because it is under threat. It's under attack. If we look at the 142 racial laws based on Afrikaners and white South Africans, if we look at the fact that we are pushed out of educational spaces and economic spaces with BE and so forth, the fact that Afrikaner culture is thriving and surviving is the direct effect of Afrikaners being under fire. So Orania's answer to that is to say, if we want a long-term sustainable and peaceful solution, that recognition, because there's currently a negative recognition, must be positive. Saying that, well, if Afrikaners want to continue to build a space like Orania, where they are building energy independence, where they're building sustainable municipal services, where they are building educational institutions, if that's recognized by the local government, there's no need to go to the United States. If that's recognized as a space for Afrikaners, there would not be a need to appeal internationally. So recognizing Orania and the territory around Orania as a space for Afrikaners where they can build institutions as such, where they can work towards that freedom, that it would not be necessary to appeal internationally. So yes,
Okay.
there's been a physical threat on Afrikaners, whether that be farm murders, whether that be racial laws, expropriation without compensation, the Bella Bill. These things put us under threat. Our identity is surviving because through our history we've thrived under pressure, and we are doing that again.
So let me ask you this: we live in a country where, I mean, we're a constitutional democracy here, and so you do have something in our democracy called freedom of association, right? And I don't think your freedom of association has been meddled with in Orania. I think we can both agree on that one, that constitutional right of yours has been protected. At the same time, though, the calls that have been made now to the US have cost funding that could impact millions of people's lives that are dependent on medication to stay alive, right? So is there a sense that this very issue where a community like Orania has continued to self-define itself, and I don't know what the outcome here that you're looking for is, but is more important than the millions of lives that are now might very well going to be struggling to find life-saving medication because of the funding cuts?
Is it truly the South African population's wish to be so dependent on the United States that we cannot look after our own? In South Africa, the government we know about the good level of corruption in the South African government. Why is the government not allocating the tax money in South Africa to help South Africans? Much rather, the corruption levels is out of control. Are we truly saying that a small appeal to the United States just shows the dependence on the United States government from the South African government and the people of South Africa? The same government that is rejecting the US on multiple levels now claims to be so dependent on them that they can't survive. No, Orania rejects dependency. We embrace independence. We strive towards independence, and we are telling other communities this is the way forward. Look after the people in your community. Look after the people in your province, in your region. Take control of your cultural home. That way we embrace independence, and we would not need foreign governments to intervene by financially supplying medication and things to the people of South Africa. How can we see this as acceptable, that the people of South Africa are so dependent on the United States for foreign aid that the country comes to a halt the moment that AIDS medication is stopped from abroad? No, we can't live like this. We must embrace independence, and that was the message from Orania since 1988 when the Orania movement was founded. Yeah. Embrace independence.
Okay, well, just to clarify, the country did not come to a halt as a result of the funding cut. In fact, just this week, the Department of Health, alongside UNAIDS, launching a campaign to see that those resources for HIV patients continue after that gap was left by the funding cuts. But we're going to leave it there. Joost Strydom there speaking to us. He's, of course, the head of the Orania movement. We'll take your calls, 010-594-6010. Prof. Steyn, one of our callers said that when these lobbyists land in the country that they should face treason. It is a call that has been made, in fact, no, not a call, steps that have been taken by the MK party. I don't know if you agree with that, but the question is, what does the country do? Because these conversations are there. You see Kali Kriel standing outside the White House. I think your mic is off, Prof.
My apologies.
There we go. Go ahead.
I think the question of what constitutes treason and if these actions actually would be technically regarded as treasonous, I think has to be decided by lawyers and has to be decided by the courts, because there are obviously clear definitions of what constitutes treason. And it may be that these actions reach those criteria, but on the other hand, it may not. But they certainly are extremely disloyal actions, and I think that certainly needs to be acknowledged. And yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
You know, I just wanted to say that when you listen to people speaking, they keep invoking this trope of victimization, Afrikaner victimization. And what we actually hear is not victimhood at all, but entitlement. That's actually what he's speaking, a position of entitlement, and a position that demands special treatment, including special treatment from the state, which would require particular state resources over and above what's being given to other communities. So this is not victimhood. Victimhood is a trope that all these right-wing backlash movements appeal to, the construction of whiteness and white people as being somehow endangered, being threatened, being in dire straits, which is how they manufacture outrage, how they manufacture sympathy, and importantly, justify and rationalize the allocation of resources to them. And I think it's also important to recognize that this is part of something that we see throughout history, modern history, which is that as Black people advance towards equality, you get greater white rage. You get outrage on the part of white people who experience equality not as equality, but as an illegitimate confiscation of their entitlements to special and superior treatment. So I think that we need to be clear-eyed about this. This is not victimhood, and we can't be fooled by that, because as people have said, and I think Seth Masiboko spoke so well to that. Where is the oppression? This is not oppression. This is entitlement.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Prof. Mr. Bolton, does we just had that chat with the head of the Orania movement. Does the existence of a community like Orania make this debate particularly difficult because the community already is there? I think your mic is off as well.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
It might. It might pose a threat within this new context. I think prior to this new interventions from Trump and this growing sense of confidence by the right wing, both not only in the US but across the world, they might see this as a place that is worthy of further support, and as a base to propagate their values and ideals. And we must be clear, when the Orania person talks about cultural groups, Afriforum uses the same terms. They really, it's a new terminology for wanting to be separate, for wanting to be segregated. Although the Orania person talks about them being self-sufficient, but they do rely on the South African economy, on the South African grid. They might be independent in some ways, but they are not fully independent of this country as much as they would like to be. I think the danger is that they will push the idea that is at the heart of what Afriforum's appeal to Trump is for support for them to have their own cultural area, which is very similar and perhaps bigger than Orania. And fortunately, we have not seen thousands and thousands of people going to Orania. It has remained small because the vast majority, as I've said from the outset, the vast majority of Afrikaners, I don't think identify with the segregationist, racist worldview of Afriforum and perhaps some in Orania. They would want to see themselves as part of a South Africa that still needs to define its identity and resolve many of its historical issues. I think the reports from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, their reconciliation barometer, and other reports that have come out in the last couple of weeks point to this, that South Africans across the board in terms of race want to find the points of unity and want to build on those points of unity. The leadership in this country, I think, has let down those aspirations of people who want to find unity, because what works in this country is when you divide people.
You know, we of course are still joined by Seth Mazibuko, June 16 Soweto Uprising leader, and we're going to hear his recommendations on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue with our discussion. The question we're asking, has Afriforum gone too far? Just earlier we spoke to Kali Kriel, who's the CEO of Afriforum, in Washington, D.C., after yet another meeting with the Trump administration, this time, though, calling for assistance with securing space for Afrikaners in South Africa, and then also wanting pressure to be intensified against the leaders of the African National Congress. This is for what they've called legislation that undermines the sovereignty of the Afrikaner people. We're taking calls. 0105946010. Mulwantwa is in Johannesburg. Mulwantwa, good evening.
Very good evening. Good evening, Osman lady.
Thank you so much, Abutaka. Talk to us.
No, Osman lady, it's just disappointing, the character of the Afriforum and the Solidarity. Very, very disingenuous. I mean, post-1994, a South African, especially the black majority in South Africa, but we have compromised this thing through our leaders, Nelson Mandela, and many following heroes, that no must forget about the past and look into the future. And as black people who agree to that theme of the rainbow nation, peace and regulation. But now, if Afriforum, they want to define themselves as the most important race in South Africa, it cannot be like that. It's very, very disappointing, and that thing is very dangerous, because now they're opening the wound of the past of apartheid against the black people who are majority in the country. It is totally unacceptable, it is totally disingenuous, and it's a liar. I mean, really, no one is held at the gun in the country. If they want to leave South Africa, let them live freely and go and settle somewhere where they'll think that, no, they'll be treated special as the African people. They're not threatened anything. Nothing is happening to them. They're still able to practice their language. They're still able to do anything. They're still farming. You can't have a small nation like Afrikaners still occupying so hectares of land in the country where the black people majority, they don't have the land. And that thing, we're quiet. But then now they go all over the world and spreading lies that, no, they've been oppressed, they've been 1, 2, 3. That is totally lying.
Okay.
We're very painful as a black people. It can't be like that.
Mulwantwa, thank you so much for calling in. Let's take a look at some of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers. Bongikaya Kama says the Afriforum and Solidariteit representatives should be arrested and treason charged. They have no roles as non-state actors in the global affairs in South Africa. They surely don't have our mandate as people of South Africa. Bongikaya, thank you for sending in that message. Mlungisi Jobeka in Botshabelo says, indeed, the Afriforum and Solidarity have gone too far, and this undermines diplomatic channels between South Africa and the United States of America. This is deeply concerning. Mlungisi, thank you for that. Anonymous says, hello, Naledi. I wish the government of the ANC would have resolved the land issue by pure expropriation of the land without compensation and made it real, unlike now, the white privilege running around spreading lies about South Africa. Keep the WhatsApps coming in. Mr. Mazibuko, the recommendations are going to come in hot and fast as to what we do about the situation. Some saying charge them with treason. What would you put on the table as a recommendation?
You know, my sister, first thing that comes to my mind is, if what they are doing now was done before 1994, what would they do to the black people then? Let's just be simple. You know, some of these arguments, what happens in South Africa is that maybe we are led by this reconciliatory attitude that sometimes we miss some very small issues and small points that we've got to ride on. Let Afriforum put themselves backward and say, if there was an ANC went abroad, trained militarily. PAC did the same. Azapo did the same. What happened to those people that are doing exactly what they are doing? Those people went to jail. Those people were killed. Those people, so many things happened to them. But they are saying to us, no, don't do that to us, what we did to you. Okay, Shem, we're speaking to Trump, and Trump is a vigorous person. Point one. I'm asking South Africans, all South Africans, including black and white, take what Freedom Front or whatever, or Afriforum, they're doing now. Take it to the apartheid era and say, that time, what would have happened? I'm not going to give solutions, but what would have happened to them? What am I saying? What would have happened to black people who were doing what they are doing pre-1994? And see how much of reconciliation we have done. We have allowed them to even get passports to get there. But point one. Point two, the Orania story. Can I tell you, my sister, I have a problem. Orania is a continuation of the apartheid policy of separate development, of having to have, under apartheid government, we had homelands. And these homelands were per language. And we're having the same under a democracy. I have a problem with that. And I'm angry with ANC. Why didn't you realize this? And we're having an apartheid under a democracy where people could create their own homeland. Bophutetswana, KwaZulu, whatever. Now we have a new version of it, Orania. I leave it to South Africans to decide on that. But the pain, the underlying pain, is that us as black people embraced peace and reconciliation. But there are some people who are saying we are not going to do it. And our government seems to be saying, no, this goes even to issues. We are being racist. Our government, per constitution, we are racist, we are xenophobic, we are all that. We get blamed for asking for, we're in pain. And I'm asking my fellow South Africans, and this I do in tears, that what do we have to be punished for what we did, we were punished for under apartheid? What do we still have to be punished in a democracy?
Yeah, Mr. Mazibuko.
Post-1994. Yeah. Why? Why?
Some strong words, Mr. Mazibuko. Truly, an emotive subject as well for many. Wandile is in Cape Town. Wandile, thank you for calling. Ngiyaphila Butunjani?
Yes, Mama. I just want to mention one or two things here. These guys are spitting in our faces. They are showing us that they have a second power. That is what they are telling us. They're actually telling us that they have a second power, and we can't correct their wrongdoing. What message are they sending to everyone around the world? That we are in Africa, we do whatever we want to do. And no one is doing anything about it. They are being given a long rope to do whatever they want to do. Can you quickly tell me if any black movement can do what they are doing? Are they going to be given this long rope? No. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
Now, you see what they are doing now. They are shutting down the hope of our kids, me and your kids. How are they gonna live and how are they gonna survive if America and all the other world countries are to use sanctions to South Africa today? What's gonna happen?
Andile, that's a very important question that you're asking, and unfortunately we are out of time. But this, as you can imagine, is not a discussion that ends easily, and it's going to continue in the country on various platforms. Certainly here on Newzroom Afrika, we'll be continuing the chat, and we really appreciate the time of our guests, Mr. Seth Mazibuko, June 16 Soweto Uprising leader and anti-apartheid veteran, struggle veteran, Professor Melissa Steyn, former professor at Wits University for Diversity Studies. Apologies for that earlier. Nishan Bolton, Executive Director at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. We also spoke to Kali Kriel earlier, CEO of Afriforum, as well as Joost Strydom, Orania movement's head as well. All right, we take a short break. We do have other news, though, on the other side of it. Stay with us.